Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to see you all here and delighted to welcome the Minister to help us launch the consultation report and the Department's response on creating a more unified tertiary system. So my name is William Bosang. I'm an Assistant Secretary in the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science, and it's a kind of title for a department that remains a bit of a mouthful, but it's a good reminder of the broad span and rationale for a department, which, as you'll hear from the contributions from the different speakers this afternoon, connects very directly to the subject matter of today's event. So the main objective that we're achieving this afternoon is for the Minister to formally launch the report on the consultation on the policy platform, which was published by the Department last May, following its consideration by Government on the development of a unified tertiary or third level education system. So there's an element of, you say tomato, I say tomato, and I know it's a subject matter of much debate among the team. What's the right phrase to use? So we use both. The Department's response to the consultation, which is kind of based on the assessment of what came back from yourselves and the organisations that you represent, is really for us a really important blueprint which will establish the priorities shaping the next steps in this important journey to a destination where we're looking, and colleagues and all the speakers today will talk about this concept in a different way, but I think what we're trying to do is create a kind of a network of kind of robust and enduring connections between all the different aspects of our tertiary or third level system, and kind of notwithstanding obviously impact value delivered by each, sometimes they can operate in a discrete way, in a separate way, and they can appear sometimes even quite siloised. So, I mean, if we look at the government's objective to create what is termed a knowledge economy, and that's in the Economic Recovery Plan, we will need, and some eminent economists have coined the phrase, to become a learning society. And in order to do so, I think it's really important that we don't set any boundaries or limits on the opportunities for learning, for knowledge acquisition, for skills development, for lifelong learning, for innovation and research. That might reflect sort of the institutional or historic features of our third level system and how it operates. So I think what's really important from the Department's perspective and from my colleagues on the team, who you'll be hearing from in the course this afternoon, is to really take this opportunity to express our thanks to you and your colleagues and the organisations you represent for the great participation and engagement that we've had with the consultation. As you will hear from the Minister very soon and from my colleagues later, the insights and perspectives we receive from you have been really important, very valuable in enhancing and deepening the Department's analysis and understanding of the potential and the opportunities from the development of a more unified tertiary education system. So, turning to the running order for the launch, our first speaker will be the Minister, Minister Simon Harris, who launched the consultation report and response and provided us with a ministerial perspective on how that system delivers on the mandate of his department. It was established 2.5 years ago, bringing together a single department with all those different responsibilities to drive that kind of integrated performance. And we're really delighted that, notwithstanding his busy schedule, the Minister has been able to be with us this afternoon. And his appetite, his enthusiasm and his advocacy for this work has really, I think, been important, I'm sure you'll agree, in giving the work a profile and momentum that has allowed us to proceed at some pace with this project. When you think about it, it was only launched, the policy platform last May, consultation went on during the summer, and here we are in early December launching the consultation report. And I'm absolutely delighted that the Minister's address will be followed by our second speaker, Kayla Kibble, who's an advocate for adult learning and community education, who worked with the team at a consultation session a few weeks ago with other learners to give that kind of learner perspective on what we're trying to achieve and the issues that are there for any learner trying to navigate what is often a complex and sometimes inflexible system. So after Kayla, we'll hear from Nessa White, the Executive Director for Transformation at SOLAS, who will be updating us on some important progress that has been already achieved on a joint project between the Higher Education Authority and SOLAS, which is delivering a very tangible manifestation of what a tertiary system would be expected to deliver, joint programme delivery on a partnership basis between further and higher education. We'll follow that with a presentation from the team, from my departmental colleagues, Thompson summarising the main themes of what we heard from you during the consultation, and Orla Lynch, who will present on the department's response to what we heard and the conclusions and the milestones that we're setting for the future. Hopefully, if all that goes to plan, there will be some time at the end for a Q&A. So a lot of ground to be covered in a short period of time, so I better vacate the podium and hand over to the Minister on that basis. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, William. Wild horses wouldn't have kept me away from today, because I genuinely believe today is such an important day for third level education, for the tertiary education system, whichever phrase we wish to use. I genuinely believe the work that you've done, and those that you represent and have worked with, has the ability to take our tertiary education system forward for the next 50 years and be as transformational for the next generation as much of the work around access to education was for the current and previous generation. I think it's so important that we have the opportunity to meet today in such a historic setting in this beautiful round room in the Mansion House, because of course today is the 6th of December and it's a historic event, it's a historic date, it's a historic centenary, because it is 100 years to the day that the Constitution of the Irish Free State came into effect. And it is quite remarkable when you think back that this was an event that was barely marked, actually. Such was the turbulent, difficult times, troubled times in which people in Ireland were living through. And in fact, it was the Irish Times that marked that the transition was hardly noticeable, and yet the change is tremendous and far-reaching. I know you'll also be interested to note that in that Constitution, 100 years ago today, it did state that all citizens had a right to what was described as free elementary education. But of course, it took about 45 years until September 1967 for free second level education to be introduced by the late great Donogh O'Malley. And that indeed proved to be so transformational. So no pressure on anybody here in this room today, but we have within our hands, within our gift, an opportunity to take steps in this historic room, remembering the historic Constitution of 100 years ago, to take the next steps in terms of transforming the education system. And I think we're up for it. And I know people working in SOLAS, people working in the HEA, in my department, in ETBs, in universities, technological universities right across the country, have really been working so hard. And my most important thing here today is to thank you all for your incredible leadership. And I'm so proud to have had an opportunity to work with you in getting to this point, because I think today is an important milestone, because today we're bringing forward the policy vision. We're marking the publication of the consultation report. Over 40 important contributions were received. I think this shows that it was a collective journey, one that we're shaping together, and I think one that shows we have a sector that is very passionate for reform. And I think that passion and that collaboration will be key to success. The consultation report highlights the areas where the system can improve, and we'll come to that in a moment. But it also very importantly shows where connection and joined up practice already exists. A number of matters do strike me from the report. Not only is there overarching support for a more unified approach, there is in fact a demand. And this is an important point. When I'm talking about this, and I've been talking a lot about this today, and I'm going to keep talking about this because I think this is so important, but this is not a kind of top-down diktat to the system. Instead, this is about empowering a bottom-up approach. This is about giving people the resources, the framework, the support in their communities, in their regions, to do what they know is right by the people of this country, to make sure that we don't have an education system that is built around institutions or logos or emblems or silos, but one that is actually built around the citizen and their ability to move as they wish, in a way that they wish, through the education system at a pace that works for them. That's the goal. And I have absolutely no doubt that the system is up for that, and as I've said, is demanding that. And we've heard that loudly, we've heard that clearly. And I'm also very clear that we're building on strong foundations. They might be what we can describe as local arrangements or informal arrangements, but there's an awful lot of good practice out there. There's a significant level of existing collaboration and engagement. So I think what the report tells us is that the work we're undertaking together is necessary, it's vital, but it's already begun, and there's a clear appetite to do a hell of a lot more together. I think it's fair to say we're coming towards the end of what has been an extremely busy year for my department, a busy year for the sector, and I'm very pleased that together we've seen many major programmes of reform and development now underway across the tertiary system. We're working really hard to implement the Future FET Transforming Learning Strategy, something Andrew Brownlee and I talk about as we've travelled around the country lately. We've published the Funding the Future policy, trying to settle the question as to how you properly, sustainably fund higher education and what the system looks like in return for that. We've launched the new research strategy, Impact 2030. We have our first ever national adult literacy, numeracy and digital skills strategy, and the infrastructure network now being put in place in terms of regional coordinators. And last month, after a long amount of debate and discussion over many, many years, we commenced the Higher Education Authority Act. It's finally now the law of the land and a modern legal basis for the governance of higher education. These plans and strategies aren't islands, and indeed they're very much interlinked with the work that we're trying to progress to create a unified tertiary system. And I do think a key example of that is in the Higher Education Authority Act. There's specific provision for the development of a tertiary education strategy, not a higher education, a tertiary education strategy. So I really want to thank everyone who's fed into the process. I most importantly want to thank the learners, because that's why we're here, that's why we get out of bed, that's whom we serve. And I know we're going to hear from Kayla, and I really want to thank you for being here. It is so important that we hear the learner perspective, and I know you already fed in at the specific learner session last month, which my colleagues tell me was so informative, engaged and very valuable in getting to this point of policy development. I'm really happy to hear that one thing that every contributor in the process did agree was on the need for a tertiary system that works for learners. I have already referenced the fact that there is examples of good practice, examples of real leadership across institutions, across regions, across sectors. And the collaborations do span a wide range of areas, from expanded regional links and pathways to increased lifelong opportunities. I've read of new courses being developed and delivered collaboratively about the thirst for universal design of learning across further and higher education and facility sharing. I was really pleased, again with Andrew yesterday, to be in Tipperary, where we announced 2 multi-million projects in capital, in Clonmel and Thurles, but these weren't about bricks and mortar. The bricks and mortar were enablers for change as we were bringing about connected campuses, not a university campus or a FET campus, a tertiary campus. And you had there the ETB and the Technological University proudly and jointly saying, this is the vision that we have to serve the learners in Tipperary. We need an awful lot more of that. I read of visual maps developed at undergraduate and postgraduate levels across specific institutions. So these examples show to me in a very practical sense how we can collectively build, strengthen and learn from those collaborations, and they do demonstrate the incredible ingenuity, innovation and dedication that exists. But we didn't just use the consultation as a way to diagnose the problem. I think we're very good at that in this country. We can tell you everything that's wrong and everything that needs to be fixed. We've got to do a little bit more than that. We've got to actually come up with the solutions. We've got to actually say, what does change look like? Where do we want to get to together in September following, in 5 years, in 10 years? And I know William and Orla and my colleagues and Nessa will expand on this, but I just want to flag some of the suggestions that I think demonstrate the transformational power of this work. Flexible pathways, adequate guidance and information, more opportunities for lifelong learning. Can we please together work to stop people talking about students as though they're all 18? Of course many students are 18, of course we need to support them. But more and more and more when we're out and about, there could be a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old or a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old listening to the radio, listening to our debates, listening to our conferences. They're learners too, and they can't necessarily pack their bags and head to university for 4 years. They need to be able to access the degree programme in a way that works for them if there's that wish. You've called for the mainstreaming of equality, diversity and inclusion across the tertiary system. I think this is really important. We can't have any poor relation when it comes to the tertiary system in relation to that or in relation to those resources, including adequate support services and improving transitions, particularly for disadvantaged groups. You've suggested national and regional coordinated forums. You've stressed the need to strengthen individual sectors and regions. You've asked for more clarity around level 6 and have pointed to the scope for more collaborative programme planning and delivery. All of these are valuable suggestions, they're constructive and crucially they're realistic. There's nothing on the list that we actually can't do and agree today that we're going to do together. But today, why I'm particularly pleased is we're not just coming with a report and a long to-do list. we're also, thanks again to your incredible work, we're also taking what I think is a very serious step forward in our roadmap for a unified system. I'm pleased to say that following intensive engagements over an 8-week period, it's incredible what you can get done in 8 weeks if it's intensive actually, the HEA, and I want to thank Dr. Alan Wall and all his team for their brilliant work, and SOLAS, I want to particularly thank Nessa White, who just gets things done, in collaboration with our ETBs and HEIs, have agreed a project to develop a new model for joint tertiary sector programmes. So today we announced the establishment of a new national tertiary office. We announced 2 new regional coordinators to be appointed in every part of this country to deliver the work. And I really want to again stress my thanks to the HEA and SOLAS for managing this project. This model will influence, drive and support a more strategic approach to ensure that the pathways between FE and HE develop, and that we see joint programmes in 13 specific areas, not beginning at some distant time in the future, but starting in the next college year, starting in September. Each course will be different, and how the model will be based on starting your degree in further education and transitioning to higher education is the cornerstone. I think of the student nurses that I met in Sligo College for further education, with Tom, who I see here in front of me. Students who did the post-leaving cert course. Students who got the best marks that they could. Students who could look out the window and see the Atlantic Technological University and couldn't get into it. And students who then had to go abroad and staff the NHS. That's not good enough. We can't stand over that. We all know we can't. And that's why the ETBs in the Northwest, that's why ATU have come forward today with one of the 13 programmes being around nursing. So that we can actually say to people, this is not about an informal arrangement. Come sign up for your 4-year programme. Start some of it in further education, and know that if you can progress and if you can pass the exams and the assessments and all the rest of the detail, you'll work out. It's not a lotto as to whether you can finish the degree here in Ireland. It's a guarantee. That's the big change we're making today, and I don't think we can overstate the significance of this. Nursing, engineering, film studies, business, computing, sustainable engineering, these are the areas we're starting in, and I think we'll all agree we're only warming up. This is phase 1, with a pipeline that we want to develop into September 2024 as well. So I could use a hackneyed phrase, but the reality is this is a landmark day and development for third level education. This is ending the idea of FET over there being the poor relation, and if you work very hard, we might talk to you about how you can get into your degree program. Those days are gone. The leadership you've shown has meant that we're beginning the end of that day today. And we're also saying to young people sitting in schools today, yes, the Leaving Cert is very important. It's a moment in time and a qualification in and of itself. Yes, doing your very best in school is very important. But you know what we're not going to do? We're not going to extinguish your dreams, your passions and your ambitions at 17 years of age if Peg Sayers doesn't work out for you on paper 2. That's what we're doing today. That's what we're doing today. And I've been in 80-something secondary schools in the last 12 months, and I'm so fed up of seeing the stress etched on the faces of young people. Points, points, points. Name the university. Not what are you passionate about and how can we help you get there. That's what a unified tertiary system looks like. It might be a lofty title, it might be speak that never quite makes it into common parlance, but we know what it means. It means making sure every citizen, if they're willing to put in the hard yards, we'll find a way of getting you there. We'll work with you through FET, we'll work with you through HE, we'll work collaboratively and we'll lead. So today is a good day. You should all be so much proud of the work that you've done. I'm extremely proud of the work that you've done, that my department's done, that the HEA and SOLAS have done, and I'm so excited about travelling this journey with you. Gurmina Magaf.
Thank you, Minister. So, Kayla, do you want to come up? Delighted to hear from you on the learner experience.
Hello everyone, my name is Kayla Kibble. I firstly want to thank Minister Harris and the department for asking me to attend today and share my learner experience through the education system at such a prestigious and high level event. I'm beyond honoured. I stand here today as a proud adult learner who has achieved a grand total of 17 distinctions between a QQI Level 4 ICT skills course and a QQI Level 5 Business Administration course from VTOS Roscommon, and a proud young mature student who has nearly finished their first semester of their dream college course, a Bachelor of Business Honours in Digital Marketing at the Technological University of the Shannon, Midlands Midwest Athlone campus. I'm also standing here today proudly representing my fellow learners who have gone through the FET route. My journey to this point hasn't been easy. At the age of 14, I was diagnosed with a rare neurological condition, which caused me to almost go permanently blind in my left eye. I went from being a straight A student to someone who missed multiple days of school due to fatigue from medication, migraines, and vertigo, to the point where I couldn't sit up in bed some days because the room was spinning. All of this caused me to fall behind in my studies, coupled with the fact my school never adequately put any supports in place for me to continue my education outside of the classroom. At the start of 6th year, I had gotten so far behind with my studies, it dawned on me that I would never be confident enough to walk into the Leaving Cert exams with the lack of knowledge and preparation I had, and I was stressed to the nines trying to catch up, which didn't help my condition. My parents and I decided, in consultation with my neurologist, that the best thing for me would be to just leave school and explore alternatives. That moment of realization that I wasn't going to achieve my Leaving Cert was devastating, because I knew that without it, all doors were closed for me in regards to pursuing higher education. At this point, I felt very lost and unsure about my future, as the Leaving Cert was seen as the be-all and end-all. I was so hyper-fixated on finding a way to complete the Leaving Cert from home, as I thought that was the only way I could eventually progress into 3rd level, which has always been a goal of mine and my family, as we very much value education. During my struggle with school, and in my attempt to find an alternative way to complete my Leaving Cert from home, my parents constantly mentioned that further education and training and VTOS Roscommon was always an option, as they were both past learners. Due to being fixated on the Leaving Cert as to what I perceived was my only option, I ended up trying to complete my Leaving Cert from home through a distant learning college. I was unsuccessful in this attempt due to it being completely self-directed learning, which did not suit me at this point. When this second chance of completing my exams failed, I had nothing to lose, but attend the open day at VTOS Roscommon, and that's when everything changed for the better. I was so nervous going in at first, as I was so unsure what it would be able to do for me, or if it would even get me into college. But after sitting down with Orla, the course coordinator, who was so amazing and understanding, I decided to take the plunge. Speaking to her was such a refreshing change from the people in my school that I was dealing with, fighting for support, because she was so beyond encouraging and helpful. And here I am, 3 years later, with 2 QQI awards equivalent to the Leaving Cert, and I'm now completing a level 8 degree. I also thankfully have better control of my illness now. FET was a completely different experience for me, and a positive one at that. My tutors couldn't have been more approachable or supportive. The small class sizes and continuous assessment model suited me. My classmates and I all came from such diverse backgrounds, and we were all able to take elements of our past experiences and put them to good use in helping each other reach our end goal of graduating from the courses. The approach to our learning was very much learner-centred and a collaborative effort between both learner and teacher, and I believe this new unified tertiary education system needs to adopt that very approach for everyone's benefit. When I was in school, there wasn't a lot of visibility of alternative routes to education, and it was very much you do your Leaving Cert, you go to college, you get a job. But if you happen to fall off that ladder somewhere along the way, or you don't want to take the normal route, you're not told it's okay and that there's more to life than the usual routes. And that's why I'm here today, and I've been advocating for adult learners with AINTHIS, the National Adult Learning Organisation, for the past year or so. AINTHIS saw something in me at their Learners as Leaders programme in July 2021 that I didn't even see in myself, and have since encouraged me to become a leader in the sector and work to ensure educational equality is a reality for all. I'd like to take a moment to commend the Minister and his department for their efforts to ensure FET is more visible to second level students and for the better inclusion of adult learners in discussions. It has opened up a conversation for everyone on if our current education system and the obsession of this one route to education and points race is actually benefiting students in this country, or are we simply hindering them achieving what they're truly capable of? It's also nice to know that our amazing tutors, coordinators, and everyone in the sector are finally being recognised for their amazing contributions to our lives. There's been a stigma for some time about taking the FET route, and it's oftentimes seen as a backup option if you don't get the CAO points you needed, or for those who failed in school, but that's simply not the case. This stigma needs to be broken. Everyone learns differently, so they shouldn't be made to take one educational route that only suits one type of student. This diversity should be celebrated, and people's achievements should be seen as equal, regardless of the routes they take. The FET sector is often forgotten about, but I hope that with this new unified tertiary education system, it is brought to the forefront and seen as equal. And I know I speak for the adult learner community and the sector when I say we are very grateful for your efforts. During my time in VITAS and completing my CAO application as both a mature student and QQI applicant, I was very lucky in the sense that I had the full support from my amazing adult guidance counsellor, Maura Fallon, from the GRETB Adult Guidance and Information Service. Without her, I wouldn't have had the amount of knowledge and information required for the application process. I also was very lucky that my college admissions office was incredibly helpful whenever I had a query, and the support from the AINTHIS team who contacted the relevant people when I couldn't find out particular information. In general though, there's a huge lack of information at present for learners who are undertaking QQI courses regarding their progression options. You have to trawl a website, go to the back end of a university website, or contact places directly to find out information. Oftentimes, learners may struggle with language used and won't know where to start looking for information. At present, there seems to be a disconnect between FET and third level, as the information for the QQI and mature student entry requirements are not parity of esteem to those for Leaving Cert students. I would love to see higher education institutions to have a more outward-looking approach where they highlight the pathways into their courses for learners, not just Leaving Cert students. Visit FET centres and include more comprehensive guidance regarding the mature student and QQI application process, as oftentimes this transition and process is completely unfamiliar. For me in particular, I completed my level 5 between 2 assessment periods because that's one of the ways my course was offered, and due to the pandemic I had to defer my start date to January because I was cocooning. I then could not use the points for my modules for the QQI route, as a lot of universities only allow points to be calculated in one assessment period, and this is an example of the disconnect. This is hugely unfair, as sometimes this is the only way someone can complete a course due to a disability, family situations, etc. And if it's being offered in the FET sector in that way, why isn't it being recognised in the higher education sector? I also would like to recommend that there should be equal opportunities for people from FET entering higher education. Having only 3 or 4 places in a programme for FET students isn't fair, and it doesn't make sense. It is completely unequitable and essentially creates more barriers for learners looking to progress. Also, if there's a higher diversity of underrepresented groups in FET than in higher education, surely utilising this pathway benefits both higher education and FET, instead of further disadvantaging those who are already disadvantaged. Why should we have less of a chance of progressing into our dream courses just because we are coming from a different route? My QQI courses prepared me hugely for my transition into third level, as it not only gave me a great base of knowledge for the modules I'll be studying, but it also prepared me for module structures, assignments, and college life in general. I actually never thought that the career I'm pursuing right now would be something I'd ever be interested in, but during my time in VITAS, I actually discovered my talent and love for the area. Standing here today, I'm proud to say that I've overcome my education struggles, and without my family, the amazing support I received from VITAS Roscommon, the GRETB Adult Guidance and Information Service, AINTHIS, and now my amazing lecturers in TUSAT Loan, I would not be in this position. I'm very grateful to AINTHIS, who have given me a platform to share my story, improve my public speaking skills and confidence to do so, and to help other people in similar situations to mine. I've made it my mission to ensure that people know all education options available to them, either as an alternative to Leaving Cert or after. I hope that sharing my personal education journey will inspire and give hope to those people struggling or unsure of where to go next, because it is possible. In my opinion, the launch of this tertiary education consultation report is a positive move forward for education in this country. It reflects how the government actually care about all students in Ireland, and they are listening and want to bring about positive change for future students. At the learner consultation, I had the privilege of representing adult learners who have progressed into third level. We all agreed at this event that it's important for this unified tertiary system model to be integrated so that learners can move smoothly and easily from second level FET to third level. Learners, especially those underrepresented in education, need to be celebrated and encouraged to make properly informed decisions and supported in taking the route that best suits them. One of my tutors once said to me, "Don't let your past define, defeat, or destroy you, let it strengthen you." And I'm doing just that. I don't have any state examinations from school, as I also was exempt from my junior cert, as it was at this time I was diagnosed with my neurological condition. I don't have my leaving cert, but have 2 QQI equivalents, and I am now a proud digital marketing student in TUSAT alone. It is possible, and I am living proof of that. Everyone is on their own path in life, and they should be supported in every way they can to achieve what they want to achieve. I hope that this report and in the future, the integrated tertiary education system will be stronger, more transparent and better connected to ensure that no one gets cast aside or left behind in education. Thank you.
Kayla, that was absolutely amazing. I mean, it's hard to believe. I think my colleagues were only talking to you a couple of weeks ago, and in that time you pulled together that what you've just spoken to us about, your experiences capturing just the inspirational journey that you've made, but also then and the word that jumped out to me was the struggles you experienced. And I suppose, you know, as listening into what you were saying, like what really hit home hard with me is like the purpose of this is to break, you know, it shouldn't be a struggle. It's about pathways and progressions that are natural, that are seamless, that are understood and are explained. So really fabulous. So thanks a million for coming along this afternoon. And it's great lead into the next presentation, our next contribution from Nessa White in SOLAS, who'll talk about the really important, as the Minister said, the really important next step that's been made in putting joint programs in place that are kind of provide the scope for a kind of a breakthrough in the kind of experience that Kayla had. So I'll hand over to Nessa. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think in the agenda I got the most difficult part. First of all, Minister Harris and now Kayla. I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon on what's a really, really important day on a journey of change and transformation that we are all engaged in. If we ever needed a reminder, Kayla's the reminder. Minister Harris mentioned the why we get up in the morning, and I often reference the office that I have in Vet Centre in Gorey, where that reminds me very regularly of the why. But any time when we come across the barriers in the initiatives that we move or that we progress, I think we'll all remember Kayla in the why we're doing this. And as much a reminder and inspiration she is, she also reminds me of the uniqueness of what we all have and the unique journey that we all have and how we need to make that okay. So what have we done in terms of the pathways piece? What have we done to move this unified discussion? And as the Minister said, I think we're really good at having the discussions and outlining what we know needs to change. It's quite a funny story when we were called, the ATA and SOLAS were called to a meeting of the department where we talked about an understanding we had of the issues and the challenges and the barriers, and so we were invited to explore what that might look like, and I think collectively we decided that maybe we'd do this time. We'd actually do something that would be tangible, because we wanted to build on the existing exceptional work that's out there. And I think one of the phrases used at one of our meetings was, you know, there are personal collaborative relationships, there are examples of really good practice. There is that policy context piece that we have now that we'd never had, but we wanted to make that something more. So we have examples where we have universities who have absolutely embraced the idea of pathways from FET, DCU, University of Galway. We have local arrangements between ETBs and technological universities and universities that are long-standing and never needed Nessa White or Dr. Alan Wall to make them happen. But what our job is to do is to make it happen better and to support you in what you're doing. So what did that look like? We started, and anyone who knows me, and I get accused of this quite regularly, of liking a plan. So we made a plan, and the plan was, you know, how, who, what would we do? And so we sat down and we made a plan, and just again to reference the importance on today, Dr. Wall sends his apologies in that this is something that he would have liked to be here, but had a long-standing commitment. In fact, the HEA senior management team had. So when we looked at the how of phase one of this, and I think that's a really important piece. This is phase one of a really exciting journey that we're on. So what would we do and who would we talk to? So we invited the chief executives and presidents of the HEIs in 5 different areas to come and meet with us. And as the Minister mentioned, I think what's different about this time was when the presidents and chief executives came into the room, I think they expected to be met with a plan or issued with instruction as to what we wanted to happen. But what was unique about this time was we listened and we learned and we were told what might work in some of these engagements between the HEI and the ETB. So we took it on board and we asked what was possible, because the outcome we want from this is a blueprint that's easily transferable. That means that because we fix it in one area like Roscommon or one area where it works for someone like Kayla, we need to be able to make this happen then on a much larger scale. So what would a unified approach look like? And the response we got was overwhelmingly positive and resulted in joint proposals being submitted from 5 areas. So if that's not a powerful statement of intent, I don't know what is. And it referenced the programmes the Minister has mentioned. And the learner was at the centre of every single conversation that we had. And in fact, in one conversation, we talked about the difference it would make to somebody where the fit just wasn't right for them to go the traditional route that we've all been, talked about and talk about for quite some time. The establishment of the office will really support that co-design piece, that co-delivery, whatever it is that's going to work in the area for the HEI and the ETB. And that's what's different about this. The support is there. The commitment from the agencies and the HEA and SOLAS, and indeed the department, in addressing the barriers or the challenges. Because we know it may not all be plain sailing. As much as I like to think these things will work out and we can always overcome the barriers, we will have some lessons learned from this journey too, and we're well aware of that. So really for me today, I just want to really say thank you. Because without the teams in the institutions, the ETBs, without the leadership, the vision, the openness and the enthusiasm of the presidents and chief executives we met, today wouldn't be as tangible as it is. Today wouldn't be going to make a difference in the learner's journey that we are all responsible for. And for me, that really means for someone who didn't go the traditional route like I didn't, for someone who has a unique journey, didn't plan or pan out the way I had planned it, that we are really privileged to be in a place that we can make that different. So to the institutions, the ETBs, to the department, to colleagues in SOLAS and in the HEA, I really think today does mark the start of something that will change education, delivery. It will result in a unified approach, and we are really part of a journey that, as the Minister said, we look back in time and think, maybe that was one of the things that worked out really well. So thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Nessa. And what was really heartening, I suppose, was just bearing out the point the Minister made, the sort of bottom-up, the sort of engagement in the system from the ETBs, from the technological sector to, come together to propose these programs that, as we're discussing, are expected to be transformational in terms of addressing that struggle that we heard about a few moments ago from Kayla. And of course it echoes or kind of resonates in terms of the work that's already been done when thinking about the establishment of a National Tertiary Office, the establishment of the National Apprenticeship Office, which is a signature example of higher education and further education and training working closely together in terms of an absolutely core priority for the tertiary education system and meeting skill needs across the economy. So we're building block by block really important progress in creating this new system out of the strengths of all the different sectors of the existing system. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleagues in the department. I think Stephanie's first, Stephanie Thompson, who's worked on this project from the get-go with Orla Lynch and with Orla, her colleague. And Stephanie's going to present on what we heard from you in more detail. You've heard a little bit about that already, but Stephanie is going to go into a little bit more detail on the feedback we received from yourselves and how that's helping to frame and shape our work going forward. So Stephanie, if you want to come on to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie and I'm the Assistant Principal Officer in the Strategic Policy Unit of the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. We're a small team. It's myself, it's Orla and it's Orla here. But we've been tasked with the mandate to progress and support the development of a more unified tertiary education system. As I stand here today, I can't help but bring to mind a passing conversation I had long before this policy work had begun to take shape and when it was still very much in its infancy as a concept. And during that conversation, I was advised that reference to a tertiary system, much less a unified one, would probably have no real meaning for anyone outside of the department. So to be standing here to speak to a consultation process on progressing a more unified tertiary education system, involving stakeholders from further and higher education, research, adult and community education, industry representatives, social partners, learners, and the wider public, it feels to me as surreal as it is significant. So it's my great pleasure to outline to you today the findings of this consultation process. The vision for a more unified tertiary education system is for a well-functioning, unified tertiary system for knowledge and skills, composed of complementary further education and training, higher education, research and innovation sectors. This policy vision was formulated to move the system closer together, recognising that while the elements of a strong tertiary system are already in place through strong individual sectors, the purpose of this work is to unify them, to ensure that they are coherent, complementary and well-balanced, and are well positioned to address future challenges. The policy vision to progress a more unified system contains 5 clear overarching objectives. The first, to offer a wide range of more joined-up learning and development opportunities to learners and researchers, to develop more inclusive cultures to grow equality, diversity and inclusion, to enable the system to adapt to change, to create more unified regional systems, and to provide for the skills, knowledge and talent needs of individuals, the economy and society. The policy vision and its objectives have been developed against a clear backdrop of an appetite for change. We have a programme for government which outlines an ambition to create a world-class system through building stronger connections within that system. The creation of the Department of Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science in 2020 reflects the priority government placed on progressing this ambition by tasking that mandate to a new, single, dedicated department. Following its creation, the department published its statement of strategy, setting out its mission to develop Ireland's tertiary system to ensure that it's capable of meeting the diverse needs of learners and researchers, as well as industry and wider society. We're all aware that Ireland is facing a wave of unprecedented change across the digital sphere, climate action, skills shortages in key areas, and predictions that Ireland will experience significant demographic changes over the next 30 years. We need a tertiary education system that is adaptable, resilient, and prepared to respond to not only the challenges, but the opportunities that these changes present. The policy vision and its objectives have been developed with the support of a very strong policy context. And since its establishment, the Department has progressed a number of policies, projects, strategies and initiatives which are developing, progressing and reforming the system. In advancing their own goals and objectives, many of these policy programmes and initiatives have begun to absorb the vision, objectives and actions in support of the progression of a more unified system. So these drivers of change and the rich policy context together provide very fertile ground for the development of a more unified tertiary education system. We've travelled a road in getting to this point today. What began as initial soundings with colleagues subsequently developed into constructive engagements where together and with the assistance of our agencies, we identified the outcomes and the actions based on existing work streams within the department which could support our policy objectives. We then worked to build that vision into something meaningful, something which would clearly set out our stall, what we're aiming to do, why we're doing it, and most importantly, how we're going to achieve it, which culminated in the publishing of our policy platform paper in May this year. The department subsequently initiated a process of open consultation and engagement with the sectors and with stakeholders, commencing with the online consultation platform in May this year. So the launching of the consultation platform was a milestone moment in that process. We provided the policy platform paper outlining the vision, the outcomes and the actions, and we asked sectors and stakeholders to provide their inputs and observations on the breadth and scope of the policy objectives, the likely risks and opportunities, any additional impacts, benefits, outcomes, and any mechanisms necessary to ensure that stakeholders are kept informed and involved in its development. The consultation closed on the 26th of August with 42 submissions received from a wide range of contributors. In recognition of the importance of ensuring that the learner voice was reflected in the consultation process, an additional opportunity for learner engagement on the policy was coordinated by the department in the form of a separate consultative learner session on the 17th of November. The session involved a representative group of learners from across the second level, further and higher education, training and research sectors, and included Kayla, who you've just heard speak so eloquently. These learner representatives, some of whom I'm delighted to see here today, shared their views on the current system, its strengths and weaknesses, how it might be improved through closer alignment between the sectors, and most importantly, they also shared their own experiences of accessing and navigating the system. Their open and frank contributions were as insightful as they were valuable, and we're very grateful for their participation. And so we reviewed the consultation submissions and the input from the learner session, and in an effort to synthesise them into a consultation report, 7 predominant themes have emerged. And these are the need for system change, stronger sectors, regions and people, programmes, qualifications and credits, a learner-centred system, skills and knowledge, research, equality, diversity and inclusion. In reviewing the consultation submissions, we were particularly encouraged by the strong welcome and positive reception for the policy vision. And it went further than that. There was an evident and overwhelming endorsement of the 5 key objectives I've just outlined. Furthermore, our readiness for transformation was apparent through the many examples of existing unified best practice between sectors, between regions, institutions, which were provided in submissions, as well as the suggestions for proposed actions which were put forward. This indicates to the department the extent to which the concept of a more unified system has already begun to embed itself within the existing system and provides a strong foundation for further, more unified and aligned action. So now let's take a closer look at the 7 themes which emerged strongly through the submissions, and allow me to give you a flavour of the insights which were communicated. The first was the need for system change. The establishment of this department, as well as strong collaboration between public sector organisations to develop policy and strategy, were highlighted as particularly valuable in progressing a more unified tertiary education system. Though submissions recognised many excellent examples of collaborations between sectors, they also highlighted that there remains significant potential for further closer alignment. Within this theme, submissions highlighted the need for governance and institutional arrangements to be established in order to better support collaboration across sectors, the importance of incentivising greater collaboration between the sectors, and the potential to grow funding approaches that incentivise and foster collaboration to progress a more unified system. In addition, to progress the co-creation of such a system, enhanced engagement, dialogue and consultation was highlighted as being essential. It was clear from submissions that there is a strong appetite and much wider scope for collaboration in fields of learning, teaching and learning enhancement, support enhancement, quality assurance, and enhancing the reputation of qualifications, thematic projects, and knowledge and practice sharing. The second theme identified was that of stronger sectors, regions and people, and the fundamental cultural shift required to open up the cultures of the sectors to work more closely together. Submissions acknowledge that the FET and HE sectors have historically developed very distinct identities, each with its own specific educational culture and distinct approach to programme provision and regional focus. Submissions express that the challenge lay not within eliminating those differences, but emphasised the need to affirm sectoral, regional and individual strengths, qualities and value added, while also adjusting cultural attitudes towards more unified and increasingly learner-centred cross-sectoral systems. It was clear from submissions that HE and FET are often better connected within local and regional communities, and it was noted that the experience and knowledge accrued through regional collaborations, through innovative, responsive and agile ways of meeting local needs, should inform the progression of a more unified system at a national level. The provision of joined-up programmes and modules across multiple FET and HE sites was highlighted as a way to facilitate collaborative approaches to pedagogy and curriculum, as well as allowing students to get a feel for university study and life, which could positively impact the student experience. Submissions also highlighted the value and efficiency of sharing of capital infrastructure on a regional and local basis. Furthermore, submissions highlighted the merit of regional strategic engagement to foster regional growth, development and equity in line with the regional rebalancing objective of Project Ireland 2040 and the associated regional spatial and economic strategy. A number of submissions referenced the challenges and opportunities presenting in relation to the theme of programmes, qualifications and credits, with many submissions highlighting the creation of the Irish National Framework of Qualifications almost 20 years ago and the integration of FETAC and HETAC into QQI as good examples of a more unified approach. Submissions suggested the National Framework of Qualifications as a foundation for facilitating collaborative programmes and providing greater clarity around Level 6 as ways of reducing duplication and providing more seamless, well-defined and tangible pathways. It was also suggested that it would be necessary to develop further a stronger identity for FET awards by promoting a common and more coherent approach across FET. It was noted that this could be achieved through more consistent and coherent FET processes, particularly with regard to the entry processes relating to application and selection. Here we see the theme of a learners-centred system. And no, that's not a mistake. I do mean to refer to learners rather than the learner. As we've said here, often when we think of the learner, we do think of the 17 or 18-year-old applying through the CEO and calculating points for college entry. But in a more unified system, we should refer to a learners-centred system, encompassing all learners, regardless of their background, their educational accomplishments, their abilities, their career ambitions, or indeed their stage in life. The inputs from the learner session, as well as from the consultation, are reflected under this theme, and these inputs highlighted the need to expand and develop pathways, to provide more coherent and easily accessible information and guidance to learners, to ensure adequate funding supports, and a more unified approach to the recognition of prior learning across the sectors. The inputs also emphasise the need to avoid the perception of a single dominant path into the tertiary system and the importance of increasing participation in lifelong learning for quality of life, career and for the community. Inputs also highlighted the importance of learners being heard by counsellors, by lecturers, by teachers, by instructors, supervisors, institutions and by the government, and the importance of learner participation in decisions that are being made about them. On this slide, I've set out a couple of the reflections that we heard during that learner session, many of which were echoed through the consultation process and which highlighted very strongly the need for this more learners-centred system. I invite you to take a few seconds to read these reflections, and as you do, there may be one or two which resonate with you particularly. For me personally, it's the one to the far right of the screen where a learner told us, "I didn't get enough points to go on to third level. I was in such a panic." I think we can all agree that a system that leaves learners feeling panicked and anxious not knowing where to turn next or what route to take, is a system which can do better simply by being more learners-centred. Within the theme of skills and knowledge, submissions highlighted the requirement for stronger collaboration between sectors and with industry to develop Ireland's talent pipeline, to attract world-class talent and to improve understanding and planning for skills. Specific areas of skills needs identified in the submissions that require a partnership approach with industry included construction, sustainability, green and digital transformation, STEM, data analytics and robotics. Contributors suggested that greater skills and knowledge were required to be imparted on learners to enable them to live, learn and work in a digital world. It was also suggested that learners needed to be equipped more comprehensively in order to be prepared for the world of work, emphasising the need to focus more strongly on developing relevant career starting skills. Contributions that spoke to the value in providing learners with the skills and knowledge that would allow them to participate to the labour market, not only as partakers, but as creators of opportunities within that market. Under the theme of research, submissions highlighted and welcomed the growing cross-sectoral collaboration between ETBs, HEIs, research and innovation and industry. The role of research was emphasised in this regard, as well as the potential for the FET sector to work more closely with the research and innovation sector to provide more comprehensive responses to skill needs and skills gaps in innovation, and the scope for more research-led pedagogy in FET. It was noted that Ireland's R&I capacity has increased significantly through previous investment initiatives and that there would be scope to expand collaborations through further investment vehicles. The importance of embracing equality, diversity and inclusion and encouraging the progression of target groups such as travellers, Roma, migrants, refugees, DESH learners, lone parents, mature students was also emphasised in submissions as key to the achievement of a more unified system. The overall inclusion of FET in the National Access Plan, accompanied by the continuation of ever more ambitious targets in future plans, was recommended, as was the development of a new unified EDI framework to be implemented across FET, HE and RNI. It was proposed that a more unified system should attach equal value to qualitative and quantitative outcomes and pay closer attention to the learner's voice, particularly those learners from disadvantaged groups. And finally, submissions also pointed to the need for more coherent support services and a greater focus on adult literacy and numeracy education, as well as on the protection and support of learners' mental health. So now that I've given you a flavour of the insights received through the consultation, the question is, how is the department planning to respond? Well, that gives me the perfect segue now to allow you to introduce my colleague and esteemed leader, Orla Lynch, who will take you through the next part of the presentation outlining the department's response to those insights and our next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie, and as usual I get the graveyard shift. I suppose I want to begin by saying that our whole sense of this project from the outset has been not to wait for the big strategy, to keep things moving as we can and to make progress where we can. And we're calling that our twin track approach. And I just want to lay that out for you now because that's embedded in how we're going to respond to this. So the first thing is, the first side of that approach is we're very mindful that the department is relatively new and that this kind of unified lens is new in the system. And so we feel we need to keep bolstering that for the time being, to talk about our strategy, to paint the vision of where we think this is going, and to work on building kind of buy-in and champions around that. At the same time, as I said, we want to listen to what's happening out there, and the Minister has said this, and it was very clear in the responses. There is a huge appetite and demand for this, and the work has already begun, often regionally or even locally, and often through quite informal arrangements. And we want that to continue to some extent, but we want to use those arrangements to learn about how the wider system can change. So just to take a moment, and I know my colleagues kind of think I'm a bit too eager about this stuff, and maybe sometimes it doesn't land, but I do think we need to talk about this vision that's coming for a unified system and what it means. And we received quite a lot in the submissions that maybe not in an overt way, but in a kind of implicit way spoke to this vision. As I said, what came through most clearly was the unanimous support and the fact that this is not only important but necessary work. What also came to was a kind of recognition of the natural interconnections that are there between FET and HE, between HE and research, and between FET, HE, research and innovation. So these aren't invented kind of artificial connections. They exist. Each system is embedded in the other. So what we're really doing is amplifying a kind of natural relationship that exists already. Just to give more specific kind of what I would call strategic messages that came through, and we've heard a lot of this, particularly in what Kayla was saying, the need for more comprehensive information sources, the need for better incentives and supports for collaboration, more unified approaches across the system, more unified frameworks, particularly what came through to us around the area of equality, diversity and inclusion. Why are we solving that in silos? Why don't we do that as a more unified piece? More robust and more diverse, and in fact those two things are related to each other, pipelines for talent in this country. A more organised tertiary footprint regionally. So better organisation to those links that are already there. And indeed, better complementarity between what we do nationally, regionally, locally, institutionally, and individually in our system. More clearly, and this kind of, I'm sorry to say, came as news to me, and it shouldn't, but it just shows you, I'm beginning to wonder, do we know what learners want? Are we clear about what their aspirations are, what their motivations are, where they want to go ultimately? I think we've a bit of a gap in our understanding there. Obviously, we heard a lot more specific points, and I will talk about them in a moment. But I wanted to first go to this, because I think this is, in my mind, and maybe I'm being a bit cheeky and courageous, but I'm going to put it up there anyway. I was originally a student of psychology, and one of the very foundational theorists around human development and so learning, if you like, was a guy called Vygotsky. And he talked about scaffolding learning. That is, understanding where someone is coming from and building a scaffold around them to progress their learning. And I think this is very much the message that we've received around building a student or a system that is more learners-centred. I understand that scaffolding looks complex and quite noisy, and I think there's a point there. Obviously, the people who build the scaffolding are highly skilled and experienced, but the people who use that scaffolding actually get quite basic training on general principles. And I think that's what we need to think about here. How can we convert what is quite a complex system into something that gives our learners the confidence to enter, to exit, to move up, to move down, move around that system, and to see it not as a hierarchical piece, but as something that is scaffolded around their own choices, their own motivations, their own talents. I also want to say that I'm including within that concept, and I'm looking at Philip Nolan there, that idea of research, because research is learning too. And we did talk to a number of research students, and we have included their thoughts around this too. So when we're talking about the system being more integrated, we are talking about kind of bringing it closer and strengthening the ties between our education system and our research system. So what does it look like? As Stephanie said, it looks more learners-centred than learner-centred. We look at maybe having common frameworks for things like EDI, for skills, for capital funding that run across sectors. And we have a system that can better, if you like, use the motivations, the ambitions of our learners to provide more diverse programs in terms of duration, mode, and location. Better balance between what's core, fundamental, what's vocational, professional, or discipline specific, and what's transferable. And getting that right throughout the system. And what I spoke to already, getting the level of agency right between the individual learner, the institution, the local area, the region, and that national piece. So just to get into then the spotlight actions, which is the other side of our twin track approach, we published spotlight actions in May of this year, and to kind of create the momentum to do something now. We heard a very good example of some very intense progress that has been made by Nessa and her colleagues, and it just shows when there is a focus how much you can achieve. But there are also other examples that I'd just like to talk about briefly. So the first thing is what the Minister referred to earlier. We've embedded this lens in a number of key departmental strategies. And so they will too carry the work and build on this over time. We also have the funding and reform framework for higher education, that's funding the future, with a clear recognition and objective within that for the creation of a unified, balanced and integrated knowledge and skills system. And that's a priority for that group. We've Impact 2030, and that talks about leveraging the rootedness of research and innovation in the higher ed system, and the added benefits that Orla and I can derive from more unified actions across the entire system. An example of an action that's going to happen in this space is the work that has begun to build greater collaboration between the research and innovation agencies and the planning for a landmark bill which will create a new unified funding agency. Our National Access Plan sets an objective for the next National Access Plan to be unified. But in addition, we're looking to the creation of a coordinator role in the FET sector to mirror one in the HE sector to work together on access issues within regions. We will continue this approach. We have our international education strategy is forthcoming, and we will work on that from a more unified perspective. In addition, we've recently established a working group to work on the development of a single portal for career information and study options for students. Our capital calls now include within them a criterion in relation to more unified use of spaces, and the recent evaluations were made on that basis. We've established a sectoral research and evaluation group to bring together all the research and evaluation activity conducted by DFERS, HEA, SOLAS, QQI, IRC, SFI and SkillNet Ireland. And as we heard about, the establishment of the new tertiary office, which we hope will start to take some of the weight from us in carrying this lens. Now, we have more specific proposals around our spotlight actions. To be quite honest, there are about 5 of these slides, and I think if I was to get into them, we'd be here a lot longer. But what I want to say is many of the proposals spoke to, very reassuringly, actions that we had already in train. However, we did get some additional proposals. They're in the yellow block there, and we will be looking to build up the next iteration of those spotlight actions with those proposals in mind. We've organised these in the report along the 5 objectives that Stephanie spoke about earlier. We want you to read the report. Cordula was laughing earlier because she was collating the responses, and I set her an objective of it all getting into 10 pages. We didn't quite make that, but I think it's at about 50 pages, which is quite a digestible kind of a report for the amount of information that we received in. So I'd ask you, it's now published on our website, and I'd ask you to have a look and have a good read of it, and you will see our intentions clearly laid out in that. So there are the 5 areas. I just want to very briefly then, if William, if you let me, talk about what we're planning to do next. As I said already, we're going to plan to develop another iteration of the Spotlight Actions for 2023, and we will take in the specific proposals that we received into that in dialogue with the sectors. We're also going to maybe work on that vision piece, that lens piece, that core piece, listening to what we heard in the feedback to start developing and strengthening that. We'll also be proceeding with those strategies that we have in our department that, at least in part, will carry this kind of unified lens and actions related to that. And we want to keep talking. We want to continue to dialogue and consult. And I think we'll have a growing interest in 2 things. Hearing what's going on at local and regional levels. That came through very strongly in the feedback, and we want to hear a bit more about what's happening on the ground. But also, I think what you see from Nessa's piece, the power of a unified proposal and a unified conversation. And I think we want to talk to more unified groups if we can. If you are able to organise yourselves together, come to us with a shared conversation, I think that could be very powerful and make a big difference. Just 2 final words, or 2 final points about the report. One is that in the submissions, we received a lot of very specific examples of things that are happening. We have recorded them, we are aware of them. We haven't reproduced them in the report, but be assured we will be working on them. In addition, I would say Irish people are great at this, never miss a trick. We did get a number of submissions that talked about policy and funding needs for specific areas rather than this more unified piece. And what we're planning to do with that is convey those communications back to our colleagues who head up the relevant units in the department. So in case you think the messages are lost, they're not. They'll be carried forward as well. Just finally then to say thank you all, and I know a lot of you here did make submissions, did take a lot of effort, especially in the summertime, to send us your views, and we're really, really grateful. But also to say, if you didn't get a chance to make a submission, if you have something to say, we have a permanent open link on the web page. You can talk to us. We're open, our door, both virtually and physically, is open, and we want to hear more. So thanks very much.
I did say at the start, I was hoping we'd have some time for a Q&A. I'm not proposing to have a long one, but I'm very conscious of the fact we're speaking out from the podium to you this afternoon. And if there was anybody in the audience, and we do have inevitably the mobile microphones, so that if anybody would want to ask a question for, of anyone on the podium, on the platform, we'd be happy to respond.
Thanks very much, Claire McGee from IBEC. Just really want to commend the launch of the report. Great to see it. But what's really important that we really heard from the tour de force of Kayla was that she was battling a system, actually, and what we need to put at the heart of that system is people. And I'm guilty of this too. I talk about skills and what business needs, and I forget sometimes that actually we really are talking about people and how do people acquire those skills. And it's not just this kind of linear education. It's actually circular, and it's the continuum of it. So my question really is that making sure when we are discussing this, how do we make sure that we don't have a repeat of the challenges against a system, and that we really do make sure that it's people, because Kayla's experience really was people who helped her out and to battle that as well, which I thought was interesting. You referenced your instructors and your teachers and your guidance counsellors a lot. So we don't want to ruin the goodwill of a lot of people, but how do we use the system to encourage better practice all the time? Thanks. Okay,
really important question. So maybe I'll start with you, Orla.
Yeah, I think the skills, I would call that skills and knowledge piece, Claire, and it's how we ensure that the alignment between people's ambitions, their talent, their kind of goals for themselves, and the ultimate destination in terms of qualification that qualifies them to work in a particular domain. There are a number of steps in that. I think one thing we've kind of missed, and I said it earlier, is I'm not sure we're clear enough about understanding the people coming in to our system and where they want to go. And I would love to see that grow, because I think it's only through aligning that with understanding where our shortages and our gaps are that we can get closer to something that brings people through seamlessly and smoothly. Aside from that, there are a whole range of actions, and I think what's very interesting is the regional space around this, and the way in which, if you look at things from a unified perspective within a region and talk about the industries that are important to that region, the research and innovation that's important to that region, and then the education, skills, knowledge, etc. That's a much more comprehensive and powerful conversation. So I think we're witnessing a time where I think almost every week we're very mindful that there are gaps opening up around areas of employment where people, the people, qualified people, simply aren't there. But I don't think it's any one piece. I think it's a number of actions, and we talk repeatedly about this being a whole flotilla rather than one big ship, and I think that's a very good example of that.
Any quick reaction, Nessa?
Yes, really quickly, Claire. For me, it's really simple. I try to keep connected with the learners in different ways. So in our advisory groups for the FET strategy, we have learners on the advice, particularly the Pathways one, to remind us of what Kayla said. And I think that's the crucial piece, is that link between policy makers, implementers, funders, being very grounded in the reality of what the struggles are, and coupled with what Orla has said, I think we then have the magic where we keep very grounded in policy and implementation, being realistic and making the difference to people on the ground.
Kayla, would you like to come in?
Just very quickly, just to say, I think in regards to listening to learners' voices, there's a concept, I think it's Corky TB they have, that is Learner Voices Group, where there is a group of learners that come together and meet and they discuss like their experiences and things like that. And that could be a way to further amplify learner voices, because at the end of the day, you know, policymakers are at the top, as we say, but I mean, we're at the bottom, you know, and we need to be able to speak directly to the top and vice versa. So I think that would be quite a good way to do it too.
Does anyone want to offer me one or two final questions? Jim Miley and, sorry, I see a lady just in, so Sheila, is it? Jim first maybe, and then Sheila.
Jim Miley, Irish University Association. So just to reiterate, I think the thank you to Kayla for a really powerful articulation of the challenges and the success that she's had in overcoming those challenges. Proof positive, I think, that Roscommon is one of the best counties in Ireland. A comment and a question. I think firstly, I think our member university is hugely supportive of opening up the pathways, and I think it's referenced that some of them are already on that, but I think we need to work at systemizing that and having that more even across the board. But I suppose the unified, I think, is something we would support, but I think we need to guard against uniformity, because the distinct parts of the sector have very different roles to play. And I suppose a comment I would make about the unified approach, and Kayla referenced it very powerfully in her speech, apart from the challenges with the pathways, she also clearly called out the challenge with career guidance. I think everyone in this room will know somebody who came through secondary school who never heard any reference to FET or apprenticeships, and that's wrong. We have an Indicon report from a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, with very clear recommendations on how that should be addressed. And I don't think we're making the kind of progress on that. So as part of the unification, can we bring that piece into this? Because if we don't, we're going to have people at second level pushing people into the continued pipeline and bottleneck to places where they aren't suitable for, or where they shouldn't be, or not putting them into places where they should be. But my question is, in terms of pathways, I think rightly the focus has been very much on clearing the pathways. But I think there is a risk, and I'd be interested in some of the panel's view on this. The risk is that the entire focus here is about creating pathways to this utopian destination of third level. But actually, that isn't the only destination. So in terms of dealing with this issue, we need to make absolutely sure that we put similar weight on ensuring that FE in itself is a really valid and valuable destination, and that apprenticeships are. Because without that, if we succeed in clearing pathways for FE to feed into third level, that may be the right solution for some people, but it is not the universal solution.
Thanks, Jim. Will we take the question just from the table in front of you? Sinead, sorry, is it? I used the wrong name earlier. Sorry about that.
Sinead O'Flanagan or Sheila O'Flanagan, either works. So actually, Jim's point is very close to what I was going to say, so maybe the panel can answer both of these, which is around career guidance at the second level, but I feel that it's not simply a question of getting the information to them so that they have it, but also actually hearing their voices in terms of their understanding of where the issues are, because they see those issues, the career counsellors see those issues, and I think that that's a very valuable input, and probably one that has already been considered. So that is one thing, but the other point that builds on that is around the communication back out to the sector. So while you get that information from perhaps certain regions as to what the needs are, what the student voices may have to say, but it's also communicating that out, because my understanding is that the minister's point about people who can't get into nursing, for example, specifically, even this year, are looking then to how they can get into the NHS system to go abroad because they don't see the pathways. So I think there's a really important element of actually communicating it back through those career counsellors as well. So that's a pathway.
Thanks very much. And two very complementary questions. And I mean, picking up on what you're saying, Jim, I mean, I'd agree with you in terms of the progress on the Indicon report. I mean, COVID intervened, but it's too important an issue to proceed it maybe at the pace that it has. And I know the Minister is very, very keen that there's a really strong pickup in our work on that. And there is a group that's recently established to drive forward on the portal concept. But it's not just a portal concept. It's, as was also said, it's a communication issue. It's ensuring that we don't just decide that it's a question of having an online resource with no scope for human interaction and no scope for using the expertise and the capacity that's there in the guidance community to steer people to better outcomes, and outcomes that are more aligned with their interests, with their potential, with where they want to travel in their lives, with the benefit of the education they can draw down from our tertiary education system. So I'd very much agree with the sentiment that you both articulated. But maybe I'll hand it over to the panel for brief responses before we wrap up.
Just to say, in response to Jim's point around the risk, I guess, that everything becomes homogenized, or maybe we, invent another. I keep talking about, we're terrible, I think, in small islands have very big beasts, traditionally in ecological terms, and I think we're desperate in this country for kind of doubling down on one solution, and that drives out diversity. I think we have to maintain diversity, and we heard a lot in the consultation about the strengths of FET, of a lot of learners with higher ed degrees who go back to FET for skills, to hone their skills. The duration of FET programs is generally shorter. There's a wider footprint, they're more locally available, people don't have to travel, etc. So we need to hold on to that diversity in our system and realise the kind of complementarity between that and higher education. So completely, and we were very focused, and you'll see it in the report and indeed in our spotlight actions, on maintaining the strength within the individual sectors that make up the entire system. But it is a balancing act, and we're very mindful of that. In terms of the guidance, I would talk about both guidance and information. And I think we need to see it quite, and I think the Indicon report anticipated this, a much more holistic vision for what we're talking about, recognising the professionalism of career guidance and giving that the space to do its job and let information do the heavy lifting on other pieces. And I think we heard from Kayla, when we met the learners a few weeks ago, we heard very clearly that the information isn't easily available to them. It's not accessible. And so kind of well-known pieces are dominating to a much greater extent than they possibly need to. And so I think that will be something that we're keen to progress, and that we know we can only progress through a whole of education approach.
I will be really brief, but Jim, thank you for the reminder. In my attempt to be brief in my input, I didn't really give the detail that may have been relevant to this, so you're absolutely right. The exit qualification at FET will still exist as part of any of what's being developed. This co-design piece, that's absolutely a fundamental part of it. You're absolutely right. On to the next piece of it, the guidance. So in SOLAS, in our attempt to have a really wide range of input on the advisory group for pathways. We have the Institute of Guidance Counsellors, the Parents Associations, we have representatives from many of the people in this room, wider than the FET piece. And I think that's where we're trying to make traction and make changes in. How do we change the hearts and minds? Because in the absence of that, we're still going to be in this place where FET isn't seen as Kayla said, the option when things don't work out. FET is an option, and that's certainly the vision that we have for how we'll communicate and articulate that.
Kayla.
Just to finally say as well, you know, in second level guidance counsellors, it boils down to education for themselves, and you know, for them to be educated on the FET options available for their students, you know, for students to be able to come in and say, look, you know, I don't know what I want to do, and for them to be able to give them a whole wide range of options rather than just, you know, HE options. And as I said, like, education is really what it boils down to, so I won't say any more, but thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, Nessa. Thanks, Orla. Sure, yeah.
Just on behalf of the Chief Executive of Ross Common Education Training Board, and just to say thank you very much. We obviously welcome this, but getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning from the west of Ireland was worth it to this institute, Kayla. It really was. I mean, if nothing else happened today, it was worth getting up to this institute to come to Dublin. For me, and to be associated with your learning journey by extension makes me extremely proud, even emotional. And those that know me know I don't get emotional that often. So if I do, it is significant. It's the reason why it's worthwhile doing what we're launching today. And we know that there are many other students who will benefit from this, not just today but into the future. And those of us that are engaged in education and given a lifetime commitment to it, we want to make it better for as many as we can. And therefore, I'm delighted on behalf of my fellow chief executives and all my colleagues in the ETB world to be here today at a proud moment, to compliment the department. And you know that we don't always do that, we sometimes engage on opposite sides of the table and have a debate, but the speed and the urgency and the importance that you've given to the notion of a unified tertiary system, that if people just don't get through a particular points race, that they have other alternatives, and that they don't have the panic that I think was referenced by your colleague there. That's not what we want students to experience. We don't want the anxiety. I know that we also, not only have we got the further education and training, we also have schools. So we're actually hearing firsthand from our principals the angst that has been created for students with the recent global pandemic, but also with the points race and how the backwash of that goes right back to first year. And I don't proudly say this, but I was principal in a second level school, and I talked on the first day to students about the journey to the points race of the Leaving Cert, and here we go for 6 years on. That wasn't my best achievement, and I regret it now, but I suppose with that regret, I hope to do something better in the future. And I was a guidance counsellor before being a principal, so I've some insight into that experience and how difficult it is for a student at 17 or 18 to actually make a choice out of 1,500 third level programs. How do you know that? I don't know it now after 8 years at third level. I just wouldn't know all the courses. So how would we expect them now to father of an 18-year-old student that will actually be moving on to make that choice and go on next year to choose these career options? So we see it from all angles. So this is extremely important. And I think what the Minister said in his speech, it is a historic day. And maybe it's the right moment to make such a development. And he referenced that how we said Donogh Valley in the 1967 free education and what difference that made. And we get 65 or 70% of our students going on to third level. But we want everyone to succeed in their own way. And if this gives us an opportunity to work collectively, those who are leaders in the field of education, how good is that? How important is it? So I, on behalf of my colleagues, welcome this moment. It is a very opportune moment. I think we should grab it with both hands and make the best use of it for the learners to come into the future. Thanks very much.
So thank you very much. I can set aside my closing remarks because you summed it up better than I ever could. So all I need to do at this stage is to thank all the speakers at the event this afternoon, to thank the Minister for his speech, to thank Kayla for what was really just a wonderful contribution, and for really grounding the discussion and making it real for us all. To Nessa, for talking about something that, is, as I've heard Alan Wall say, it's a thing now. It's a thing that's out there, and that's important. And of course, to my own colleagues, Orla, Lynch, Stephanie Thompson and Cordula Berry, who's been keeping a low profile but is an absolutely central member of the team. I'd like to thank you all for your engagement and for coming along this afternoon and sticking with it, for your engagement and consultation, and what I know will be your continued engagement in this process going forward. And of course, I'd like to thank the Mansion House team for looking after us so well this afternoon, the sound, the light, the refreshments, the recording, and just facilitating what was really a wonderful occasion. So I'll just wrap up by wishing you all a happy Christmas, and hope you all travel home safely. Thank you very much.